You won't shoot me. You're a policeman. There are rules for policemen. I don't need no Monday morning quarterback, McLean. Are you telling me I'm in this shit because some white cop threw some white asshole's brother off a roof? You just destroyed a helicopter with a car, dude. I was out of bullets. Uh... Welcome to my ranking of the Die Hard films. This feels like a good time to do this because I read an article a few weeks ago which apparently claims that this series is now dead. They're not going to make a sixth film after all. It was rumoured for years after the release of the previous one that they would make one last film, a sixth film, and that they were going to call it Die Hard Year One. Apparently, half the movie was going to feature an older John McClane, played by Bruce Willis, obviously, and the other half was going to be McClane in his younger days, presumably played by a completely different actor. I was never sold on this idea personally. It just didn't really tickle my fancy. I'll tell you what I would have done with the sixth film. I would have just made a traditional Die Hard film. I would have set it in Japan. I would have had McClane go there trying to reconcile with his wife. And then the whole thing would have been set in some building which would have been much like the Nakatomi Plaza from the first film. So I would have brought the series full circle, in other words. I think that would have been a good way to go out. But alas, we are not getting a sixth film, so let's get into today's video. Now, let me just say that I have never had an easier time putting a ranking together. When I sat down with my pen and paper to decide where I was going to put these films on the list, literally, I did it in about 30 seconds flat. It was like, yep, that's going fifth, yep, that's going fourth, third, second, first. There were no two films in this ranking where I was like, I'm not sure between these two. And yet, where I've put my films, I'm not sure that everybody else would do them the way that I've done them now that I think about it. So anyway, let's see how we get on. One thing I will say is that I've probably got the same fifth film as everybody else. Let's find out what it is. I've heard a lot of people trash this one over the years, but the one time I watched it, I thought it was all right. It was about a year after it came out in the cinema. I watched it with my wife and my dad, and I went to bed thinking, yeah, that was an all right Die Hard film. I mean, all right isn't going to get you very far in this ranking because all the films after this point are excellent. But from memory, there was a really good chase through the streets about halfway through the film. There were some other good actiony bits. It wasn't brilliant, but I don't think it was a complete disaster. Although I've never watched it a second time, so that probably tells me something. I actually bought it on DVD at some point, really cheap, secondhand, just to complete my collection on the shelf. At some point, I'll give it a second watch, but there's no way that this film could improve enough on a second viewing to get anywhere near even the film which is fourth today. So here we have Die Hard with a Vengeance, and this is possibly where my opinions differ a little bit from what the general consensus is, because I know this is a popular one with a lot of people. I like it too. I think New York is a great place for a Die Hard film. Zeus and McClane have an amazing chemistry, and the story is possibly the best in the series, but there are three things about Die Hard with a Vengeance which gall me. Firstly, the violence is really toned down in this one compared to the first two films. It's really noticeable. There's one scene where McClane shoots about 4 guys in an elevator, and I swear there's not a drop of blood in there after he's finished. Secondly, he gets into this fight with the main henchman on a boat near the end, and it's impossible when you're watching that scene not to think of his similar fight with Carl from the first movie, but this fight is nowhere near as good. There's too many cutaways. And then the villain somehow survives that and ends up back up on the bridge with his boss. So I don't think they did that very well. And then the entire finale after that is really weak as well. The Gruber brother, whatever his name was, he's got about 100 bad guys in this warehouse. And then the police sort of find out where they are, and all the bad guys start arming themselves with Uzis and stuff from this massive crate, and you think, wow, this is going to be one hell of a battle to finish things. And then it isn't. They all sort of surrender. There's like trucks and vans of bad guys driving towards these traffic lights, and then they suddenly like oh, we give up, it's a fair cop. And I'm thinking, that's a bit lame. And then McClane comes along and just shoots the main villain in his helicopter. That whole last 15 minutes was terrible for me. And yet the movie up to that point had been brilliant. So it's just a shame they dropped the ball at the end. The lack of violence thing doesn't bother me as much with this one because I was used to it by the time the fourth one came out. By the time Die Hard 4 was released, I had probably seen Die Hard with a Vengeance about 5 times. Also, when the third film came out, there was pressure on it. You know, it meant a lot to me. I was about 14 at the time. As far as I was concerned, Die Hard with a Vengeance just had to deliver, or I was going to be really disappointed. And I think I sort of was because of the reasons that I just went into. But then there was this massive gap between the third and the fourth film, and I just didn't really care that much by the time that the fourth film finally came along. I mean, my life had changed a lot between Die Hard 3 and 4. I was about 14 when the third film came out, and I was probably about 26, 27 when the fourth film arrived. I did see the fourth one at the cinema, but it kind of felt like McClane had a free hit with it. You know, okay, impress me if you can, but if you don't impress me with this one, it's not that big a deal. To my surprise, though, it was a great movie. I thought the plot worked well. I liked McClane's chemistry with his new young computer geek. There's some great villains in the fourth one. The action sequences deliver. I even like the bit with the jumbo jet thing, which I think a lot of people had a problem with. The only thing in this movie that I can think of which is a little bit ropey is the last little fight with the main villain where, if correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't McClane shoot himself? The bullet goes through him, kills the bad guy, but McClane's all right. Believe it or not, this was the first Die Hard film I ever saw, and it blew my mind. I was only about 11 at the time, and I just thought it was the most incredible thing. You know how when you're a kid, you sometimes watch the same film over and over again? That's what I did with Die Hard 2. I watched it so many times. The plot is probably quite simple for me today to understand, being as old as I am, but when I was that age, it was a little bit complicated, the plot and all the things going on and all the double crosses and stuff. And every time I watched the movie, I sort of understood it a little bit more. It was like I was gradually solving a puzzle. I was unraveling it with every watch of the film, and I had so much fun with it. I think this is one of the most underrated action sequels ever made. I think it's close on perfect for what it is. It's such a great movie. It's not quite my number one, though. I'm guessing it's not going to be much surprise to anybody watching this what we still have left to come. I was only just talking about this one the other day when I did my 1988 rankings video. Die Hard 1 obliterated the competition that day. It has obliterated the competition again here, although I don't think it's that far ahead of Die Hard 2 personally, because I'm a big fan of the second film in this series. But certainly this is the best, Die Hard 1. I've never heard anybody say that this film is bad. I've never even heard anybody say this film is just average. It just seems to be a universal, unanimous opinion of everybody on the planet that Die Hard is amazing, and rightly so. The only debate of any kind I've heard when it comes to this film is whether or not it's a Christmas film or not, and I don't really care, although it is a Christmas film. The reasons why this film is so great, just the same reasons that I went on about when I was doing my 88 rankings. You know, great characters, the action all the way through is amazing, the villains are great, and there's just such a great sense of tension and suspense when you're watching this cop just trying to survive against all these professional assassins in such a small confined space as this tower block building. It's just an incredibly filmed movie. I absolutely love it. It is number one today. That was my Die Hard rankings. I'll be back with another video another time. Yippee-ki-yay, mother.